back to the Wisdom by Harry YouTube channel. My name is Harry.
And I'm Mary. We're so excited to have you here today for another fascinating episode.
All right, so you know how sometimes when you look up at the night sky and you really see something special?
Oh yeah, definitely like recently with that total lunar eclipse.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the Earth, the sun, and the moon all just line up perfectly, and then boom.
Like a cosmic shadow puppet show.
Uh-huh. Yeah, pretty much. And that's exactly what happened back on March 13th and 14th this year.
Yeah, that was the first one that was really visible across a huge chunk of both North and South America for a few years, right? Since 2022, I think.
Yep, you got it. And of course, it had to have an awesome name like the Bloodworm Moon Eclipse, right?
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. The March full moon is traditionally called the worm moon, and that name has been around for a long time.
Oh yeah, it goes way back.
And it really gets at that whole feeling of spring and new beginnings, you know?
Mhm.
Like the ground thawing out.
Yeah, and the earthworms starting to come back up. That's a classic sign of spring.
Exactly. Like even the Farmer's Almanac talks about that.
They've been tracking that stuff for ages. It's pretty cool.
For sure. And, you know, it's not just a fun name either. Those earthworms are like a huge food source for so many animals.
Totally. Birds especially, they really depend on them after a long winter.
So there's this whole ecosystem thing going on that's tied to that worm moon. It's not just some random name.
It's all connected.
Right. And then you add in that blood moon part and it just gets even cooler, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, that reddish color the moon gets during the eclipse is just amazing. It's definitely eye-catching.
Yeah, for sure. So what we really want to do today is take a deep dive into what made this bloodworm moon eclipse so special, you know? Like when exactly did it all go down?
Right, the timing is key.
Totally. And where were the best places to see it? And of course, like what causes that whole blood moon effect in the first place? What's the science behind that?
Yeah, the science is really fascinating. It's all about how light interacts with our atmosphere.
Oh, I can't wait to dig into that part.
Yeah.
So anyone out there who stayed up late or set their alarm to catch this, you know, it all started late on Thursday, March 13th and stretched into early Friday morning.
Yep, March 14th, right. So if you were on the East Coast, the main action was happening after midnight.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But for those on the West Coast, it was a bit earlier in the evening.
More of a primetime viewing experience over there.
Totally. Now the real highlight, the total eclipse, when the Earth's shadow was completely covering the moon, that began at 2:26 a.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, so what time was that for people out west?
That translates to 11:26 p.m. Pacific Time Thursday night.
Okay, much more reasonable, haha.
Yeah. And if you're looking at it on a global scale, that was 0626 GMT on Friday morning.
Gotcha. So once that total eclipse started, how long did that awesome blood moon effect last?
The total eclipse lasted for a good while, actually like 66 minutes.
Wow, over an hour.
Yeah, so plenty of time to check it out and really appreciate the whole thing.
That's awesome. So as with anything, space-related location is key, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure.
So for this particular eclipse, how did the viewing experience differ depending on where people were around the world?
It varied a lot, actually. Like for North America, like we said, the East Coast had it after midnight and the West Coast had it earlier in the evening.
Makes sense. What about Europe?
So Western Europe, they were able to see the very beginning of the eclipse right as the moon started to move into Earth's shadow.
Oh, cool.
But then the moon set, so their view got cut short.
Ah, bummer.
Yeah. But down in New Zealand, it was the opposite. They actually saw the moon rising while it was already in the middle of the eclipse.
Wow, that's so cool. So it sounds like North America really lucked out with this eclipse.
For the most part, yeah. But as always, you got to factor in the weather.
Yeah, that's always the wild card, isn't it?
It really is. It can make or break your viewing experience.
So let's talk weather. If you were hoping to see this bloodworm moon in all its glory in the U.S., where were the absolute best spots to be?
Well, the forecasts were looking pretty good for the lower Great Lakes region and the Ohio Valley.
Okay, nice.
And that good weather extended southwest down through the Central Plains and all the way into Texas.
Wow, that's a lot of prime viewing area.
Yeah, those areas were mostly looking at clear skies. Or maybe just a few scattered clouds. Nothing too major, like no more than 30% cloud cover.
Awesome. So if you were lucky enough to be in one of those spots, chances are you had a pretty amazing view, huh?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so where were the clouds causing problems?
Well, unfortunately, the northern and central Rockies were having a rough time.
Oh no.
Yeah, there's a big storm system moving through there, bringing a lot of clouds and even some precipitation.
Not ideal for eclipse viewing.
Nope, not at all. Pretty much guaranteed to block the view for anyone in that region.
Bummer. Okay, so that's the Rockies. What other areas were dealing with clouds?
Well, Pacific Coast, Washington, Oregon, and Northern and Central California were also expecting some cloud cover.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they have this thing called the marine layer, which is basically a blanket of low clouds that hangs out along the coast sometimes.
I see.
And it looked like that was going to be a problem for eclipse viewing. And then down south, the Gulf Coast was also facing some cloudiness. Yeah. Places like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, and even parts of South Florida were all expecting low cloud cover.
So basically, both coasts were a bit iffy.
Yeah, pretty much.
What about the East Coast? A lot of people live along that I-95 corridor.
Unfortunately, the I-95 corridor from the Virginia Capes up to Maine was also in the potential cloud zone.
Oh, no, why?
Yeah, it looked like there was a weather system offshore that was going to bring in some low clouds from the Atlantic.
Oh, man, that stinks. So places like Philadelphia, New York, Boston, all potentially clouded out.
It was a possibility, yeah.
Was there any hope for East Coast folks?
Well, some meteorologists were saying that if people could drive a little ways inland away from the coast, they might be able to get out from under those clouds.
Oh, so like heading west or north?
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't a guaranteed clear view, but it might have been worth a shot.
Okay, so we've talked about the best and worst case scenarios. What about all those areas in between?
So those places had what was being called fair viewing conditions.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Basically, it meant partly cloudy skies. So somewhere between 30% and 70% cloud cover.
So hit or miss.
Yeah, pretty much. You might get lucky and have some clear patches right when the eclipse is happening, or you might be stuck behind a bunch of clouds.
Fingers crossed for clear patches, right?
Absolutely.
And what about the areas with really heavy cloud cover, like 70% or more? What was the outlook for them?
Well, officially, it was considered poor for viewing the eclipse.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it was unlikely they'd get a clear view. But, you know, even with lots of clouds, there's always a chance you might catch a glimpse of the moon here and there.
It's like that saying, right? Hope springs eternal.
Uh-huh. Exactly. And, you know, even if it was just a brief peek through the clouds, that red color would still be pretty striking.
I bet. Like, imagine seeing just a sliver of that blood moon through a break in the clouds.
Almost like a spooky eye looking down at you.
Ooh, yeah, that's a great image.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the science behind that amazing red color. What causes the moon to turn into a blood moon during a total lunar eclipse?
It all comes down to how sunlight interacts with Earth's atmosphere. So during a total lunar eclipse, the moon moves into the Earth's shadow, which blocks direct sunlight from hitting it.
So basically the Earth is getting in the way.
Exactly. But here's the thing, some sunlight still reaches the moon indirectly by passing through Earth's atmosphere.
Oh, interesting. So it's not completely dark.
Right, and as that sunlight travels through our atmosphere, it gets bent and scattered.
Okay, so why does that make the moon red?
Well, different colors of light have different wavelengths, and our atmosphere scatters shorter wavelengths like blue and green much more effectively than longer wavelengths like red and orange.
That's why the sky is blue, right?
Exactly. Blue light gets scattered all over the place, making the sky look blue. But during a lunar eclipse, the blue and green light from the sun gets mostly scattered away by our atmosphere.
Okay, and what happens to the red and orange light?
Well, that longer wavelength light is able to pass through the atmosphere, and then it gets bent or refracted towards the moon.
Right.
And that's what gives the moon that reddish glow.
So it's like all the sunsets and sunrises happening on Earth at the same time are shining their light onto the moon.
That's a great way to put it. NASA actually describes it as like thousands of sunsets being projected onto the moon.
That's so poetic. I love it. And you know what's even cooler is that during this particular eclipse, the moon passed through the northern part of Earth's shadow.
Oh yeah, that's right. And that actually affected how the color looked across the moon's surface.
Really? How so?
Well, since we're in the northern hemisphere, the southern edge of the moon was closer to the center of Earth's shadow, so it appeared a bit darker during totality.
Oh, that makes sense.
And then the northern edge of the moon was farther from the center of the shadow, so it ended up having a lighter, more pinkish-orangey hue.
Wow, so there was like a gradient of color across the moon.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty subtle, but if you were
Yeah.
looking closely, you might have noticed it.
That's amazing. So even within that blood moon effect, there were variations.
It all goes back to the geometry of the eclipse and how the light is passing through our atmosphere. It's really neat.
I love how much detail there is in all this.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the blood moon aspect. Let's get back to the worm moon part of the name.
Right.
So we know it's about earthworms coming back up in the spring, but is there anything else to that name? Like, what does it symbolize?
Yeah, it really captures that whole sense of spring and renewal, you know? Like March is that month where winter starts to loosen its grip and things start coming back to life.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of hope after a long winter.
Exactly. And besides the earthworms, it's also a time when the ground starts to thaw, which makes it easier for birds and other animals to find food.
Right, so it's not just about the worms, it's about that whole shift in the ecosystem.
It's all connected to that idea of things waking up and growing again.
It's pretty cool how these celestial events are tied to what's happening down here on Earth.
It's like the universe is in sync with our seasons.
I like that. So speaking of connections, did you know that this particular eclipse has a fascinating historical link?
Oh yeah, it does. It actually involves Christopher Columbus.
No way. What's the story there?
So back in 1504, Columbus was on his fourth voyage to the Americas, and he and his crew ended up stranded on the island of Jamaica.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was a tough situation. Their supplies were running low, and the indigenous Arawak people who lived on the island were getting tired of helping them out.
I can imagine.
So Columbus needed to find a way to convince them to keep providing food and supplies. And being a clever guy, he came up with a plan that involved a lunar eclipse.
No way he used an eclipse to his advantage. Tell me more.
So Columbus knew that a total lunar eclipse was going to happen on February 29th and March 1st of 1504.
Wow, so he knew ahead of time.
Yeah, he did. And he decided to use that knowledge to his advantage. He went to the Arawak people and told them that his Christian God was angry with them for not helping him and his crew.
Oh wow, bold move.
Right, and he said that as a sign of his anger, God was going to make the moon disappear.
Oh my gosh, he was going to use the eclipse to scare them.
Exactly. And of course, when the eclipse happened right on schedule, the Arawak people were totally freaked out.
I bet. Imagine seeing that with no scientific explanation for what's happening.
Right, it must have seemed like magic or a sign from the gods. And they were so impressed by Columbus's apparent power that they agreed to start giving him and his crew supplies again.
Wow, so he basically tricked them with astronomy.
Uh-huh. In a way, yeah.
I know.
But it just goes to show you how powerful these celestial events can be, especially when people don't understand the science behind them.
That's a wild story. I love it. And it gets even crazier because this bloodworm moon eclipse we just had is actually connected to that 1504 eclipse in a really specific way.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the Hypersaros cycle, right?
The what now?
The Hypersaros. It's basically a super long cycle in lunar eclipses that spans about 521 years.
Wow, that's longer than the U.S. has even been a country.
I know, right? And the thing is, eclipses that are separated by one Hypersaros are like almost identical twins. They have the same depth, same position in the sky, and they even happen around the same time of year.
That's mind-blowing. So basically, the eclipse we just saw was like a repeat of the one that Columbus used to freak out the Arawak people.
Exactly. It's like a cosmic echo across the centuries.
That's so cool. Okay, so for anyone who missed this eclipse, or for those who are already eager for the next one, what does the future of lunar eclipses look like, especially for us here in North America?
Well, the good news is that total lunar eclipses aren't super rare. We actually have another one coming up later this year on September 7th and 8th.
Oh wow, 2 in 1 year.
Yeah, it's going to be the corn moon eclipse, and there's a good chance it'll turn into a blood moon too, so double the fun.
Awesome. What will the viewing be like for that one?
So this one is going to be best visible from Asia.
Ah, so not so great for North America.
Not as ideal, no. But Europe might catch a glimpse of it around moonrise.
Okay, so when's the next one that we in North America will have a good chance of seeing?
The next one that's prime for North America is happening on March 3rd and 4th, 2026.
Okay,
Yeah.
not too far up.
Nope. And the best viewing for that one will be in Hawaii, Alaska, and the western parts of the US and Canada.
So West Coast is going to be the place to be for that one.
Pretty much. And that one will have a totality of about 58 minutes.
Sweet. So mark your calendars, folks. March 2026.
Definitely. Okay, and this is super important, especially for anyone who's never seen a total lunar eclipse before.
What's that?
Unlike solar eclipses, total lunar eclipses are totally safe to look at directly.
Oh, that's good to know.
You don't need any special glasses or filters or anything. You can just look right at it with your naked eye binoculars or even a telescope if you have one.
So no risk of eye damage whatsoever.
Nope, totally safe. It's one of the great things about lunar eclipses.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So back to this bloodworm moon eclipse. How long did the whole thing last from start to finish?
So the entire eclipse, from the very first hint of the moon entering Earth's shadow to when it completely left the shadow, was about 6 hours.
Wow, that's a long event.
Yeah, it was a slow burn. But of course, the most dramatic part, the total eclipse with that blood moon effect, only lasted for about 65 minutes.
Right. Okay, so last thing. This eclipse happened really close to the Ides of March and the spring equinox. Is there anything special about that timing?
Well, the Ides of March is definitely an interesting tie-in. It was a big deal in the ancient Roman calendar, and it's also famous because that's when Julius Caesar was assassinated.
Oh yeah, beware the Ides of March, right?
Exactly. And the spring equinox is, of course, the first day of spring.
Yeah, new beginnings and all.
Right, so having a full moon and a total lunar eclipse happen so close to those dates is pretty neat. It's like this cosmic alignment with our human calendar and the changing seasons.
I like that. So to wrap up our deep dive into this amazing bloodworm moon eclipse, we've learned that it was a pretty rare event, especially for North America.
Yeah, we don't get to see total lunar eclipses like this very often.
Right. And we talked about how that stunning blood moon effect happens. It's all thanks to Earth's atmosphere acting like a giant lens and filter, scattering away the blue and green light and letting that red and orange light shine through.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. And we also dug into the worm moon name and how it connects to spring and the whole cycle of life coming back to life after winter.
Yeah, that's a cool connection.
And then there's that whole historical link to Christopher Columbus and how he used a lunar eclipse to basically trick the Arawak people.
Yeah, that's a classic story. And the fact that our eclipse was connected to that one through the Hyper-Saros cycle is just mind-blowing.
It really makes you think about the vastness of time and space.
It does. And hey, if you missed this eclipse or you're already craving another one, don't worry, there are more coming up soon.
Yeah, we talked about the corn moon eclipse in September, although that one's not going to be great for North America.
But then there's that one in March 2026 that'll be perfect for the West Coast.
So there's definitely something to look forward to.
Absolutely. And remember, lunar eclipses are totally safe to watch, so no need to worry about eye protection.
Yeah, just go out there and enjoy the show.
Exactly. So the next time you have a chance to see a total lunar eclipse, take a moment to really appreciate it. Think about all the amazing things that have to line up perfectly to make it happen.
And think about how people hundreds of years ago would have reacted to seeing something like that.
It's a connection to history and to the cosmos all at once.
It really is. And who knows, maybe this bloodworm moon eclipse will spark some new curiosity in you about astronomy and all the wonders that are out there waiting to be discovered.
That's what we love to see. Curiosity is what keeps us exploring and learning new things.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome. Well, I think we covered just about everything there is to say about this amazing eclipse.
I agree. That was a fun, deep dive.
It was. I always learn something new when we do these.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode, folks. Thanks for tuning in and keep looking up.
Until next time, happy stargazing, everyone.